What happens when an old-school judge, famous for his booming voice and iron grip on the courtroom, tries to intimidate a young congresswoman who refuses to be silenced? What began as a routine testimony turned into one of the most unforgettable confrontations in modern legal history, a battle not of volume, but of values. Before the gavel could strike, the power dynamic flipped, and the nation witnessed a masterclass in how real leadership works. This is the story of how Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett turned Judge Joe Brown's attempted intimidation into a generational lesson on respect, authority, and the true meaning of strength. The tension in the courtroom had reached its peak, Judge Brown's gavel still echoing faintly in the chamber, a desperate attempt to regain control. But without raising her voice or showing a trace of intimidation, Jasmine Crockett slowly rose from her seat. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't theatrical, it was deliberate, and the shift in energy was immediate. The audience, already on edge, fell into a sudden hush, even Brown himself pausing mid-sentence, his booming cadence cut short by the simple act of her standing tall. Crockett gathered her papers, straightened her blazer, and fixed her gaze on the judge, not with anger or panic, but with steady confidence, the movements of someone who had stood in the crosshairs of power before and survived. For the first time all day, Judge Joe Brown was no longer commanding the room. The gallery's eyes belonged to her. This was no longer about courtroom ritual but about signaling to everyone in that chamber, and to those who would later watch the clip online, that she was done playing defense. She was here to take control of the narrative, and the calm, unshaken way she stood made it clear that the Congresswoman was not just there to testify but to redefine the moment. The battle of wills had shifted, the silence broken only by the faint creak of wooden benches as people leaned forward, bracing themselves for what would come next. And when she finally spoke, her words carried a weight that stilled the room. "Respect," she began, her voice calm but firm, "is not about fear. It's not about who can shout the loudest. Real respect is earned, through fairness, through honesty, through consistency." The words landed with the force of a gavel strike. Not in anger, but as a lesson, one meant not just for Judge Brown but for everyone in that chamber and for the thousands who would later watch online. "You may demand obedience, Judge," she continued, unwavering. "But obedience is not the same thing as respect. You can intimidate someone into silence, but that doesn't mean you've won their respect. Respect comes when people see integrity, when they see justice." The gallery stirred, small nods of agreement, quiet murmurs of support, and even the court stenographer seemed to slow her typing, as if taking in the gravity of each word. Judge Brown shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening, for years defining respect as submission. But here was a young congresswoman, unafraid, rewriting that definition before his very eyes, and the courtroom was listening. In that instant, Crockett wasn't just defending herself. She was reframing the entire confrontation, making it clear she wasn't on trial at all. Respect itself was. The room was hanging on every syllable, the tension so thick you could almost hear the heartbeats in the gallery as Jasmine Crockett paused, letting her last words about respect settle like dust after a storm, before delivering the question that shattered the courtroom's fragile balance. "Tell me, Judge, is the hostility I'm receiving here today because I'm young? Because I'm a woman? Or because I'm a black woman who refuses to bow to intimidation?" The words struck like a bolt of lightning, gasps erupting from the benches as some leaned back in shock and others forward, desperate not to miss a single reaction, while even those secretly recording trembled, knowing they had captured a moment destined to go viral. Judge Brown froze, his booming voice, his lifelong weapon, suddenly useless. His mouth opened as if to reply, but no words came, and for the first time in decades of dominating courtrooms, he looked cornered. The brilliance of Crockett's question wasn't just in what it asked, but in what it exposed. His treatment of her was never about procedure or professionalism. It was about power, prejudice, and the old guard colliding with the new. The silence that followed was deafening, the judge's reputation built on control now crumbling as the room waited not for him, but for her. And in that moment, Crockett didn't just hold her ground, she turned the courtroom into her stage. Judge Joe Brown's jaw flexed, eyes narrowing, but his voice didn't come fast enough, and that pause was all she needed. "Respect," she continued, seizing the moment, "is not demanded by shouting or by threatening. It is earned through fairness, through consistency, and through integrity. If this courtroom is truly a place of justice, then it should not matter whether I am a congresswoman, a waitress, or a school teacher. The truth deserves to be heard, without intimidation." The gallery murmured in agreement, A few claps slipping out before security hushed them, cameras zooming closer as if recognizing history in the making. Judge Brown's lips curled into a scowl. "You don't lecture me about justice," he snapped, but the thunder in his voice had lost its weight, sounding defensive rather than commanding, and with each word, the shift became undeniable. For decades, his persona had made others cower. But here was Jasmine Crockett dismantling his authority piece by piece with nothing more than composure and conviction. He slammed the gavel, but instead of restoring order, the sharp crack only underscored how much control he was losing. "Order," he barked, but the order wasn't his anymore. The energy of the room had flipped, the whispers no longer about his authority, but about her courage, and in that moment, everyone watching knew the tables had turned. What happened next spread far beyond the walls of that courthouse. As Judge Brown struggled to reassert control, dozens of phones were already capturing every second of the exchange, and within minutes, those clips were online, first on Twitter, then TikTok, then everywhere. One clip in particular went viral. Crockett, calm and unwavering, declaring, "Respect is not demanded by shouting. It is earned by fairness." That single sentence became the spark. Within an hour, hashtags like hash Crockett vs Brown hash respect earned and hash changing of the guard were trending nationwide. Influencers, political commentators, and late-night hosts began replaying the footage on loop. Some framed it as a generational clash, old-school authority versus new-school leadership, while others called it a masterclass in composure under fire. Memes appeared almost instantly, Judge Brown roaring like a lion while Crockett stood coolly in sunglasses under the caption "unbothered." Back inside, the courthouse atmosphere shifted dramatically. People weren't just observing anymore, they were narrating history in real time through their devices. The steps outside swelled with reporters and supporters, their phones buzzing as clips spread faster than the hearing could continue. By the end of the day, the confrontation wasn't just a courtroom drama, it was a national story, dominating news cycles and forcing Americans everywhere to debate what real respect, authority, and leadership look like in the modern era. By the next morning, the moment had leapt from social media to the front page of every major newspaper. Networks ran the footage on a loop, Judge Brown's flushed face, Crockett's unflinching calm, and the thunderous applause from the gallery. Pundits framed the clash as something far bigger than a spat. Progressives hailed it as a generational changing of the guard, proof that the next wave of leadership would be fearless, principled, and unshakably composed. Conservatives, while divided, struggled with the optics. Some tried to brand Crockett as disrespectful to a judge, but the footage itself, her calm precision against his flustered shouting, undermined their case. Moderates largely saw it as a lesson in dignity, praising Crockett for standing up to abuse without chaos. On Capitol Hill, reactions were immediate. Colleagues whispered in corridors about how she had handled herself. A senior Democrat was overheard telling a staffer, "That's what leadership looks like. Controlled fire. She didn't just win the room, she won the country." Republican strategists, meanwhile, privately admitted the optics were devastating for Brown but transformative for Crockett. "She's going to be a national name now," one GOP aide conceded. Late-night comedy shows piled on, roasting Brown mercilessly. One skit depicted him screaming gibberish while Crockett sipped tea, the punchline, "Guess who looks like the real judge now?" But behind the jokes were serious political tremors. Crockett's campaign launched fundraising emails that very night, drawing donations from all 50 states. Civil rights groups amplified her words as a continuation of the fight against systemic bias in courtrooms. Young voters, especially women of color, embraced the moment as proof that someone was finally speaking their truth in spaces designed to silence them. By week's end, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a congresswoman from Texas anymore. She was a national figure, her confrontation replayed not as mere political theater, but as a defining case study in leadership under fire. What happened in Judge Brown's courtroom didn't stay confined to the political world. It seeped into the culture at large. Within days, the confrontation was being referenced not only in legal circles but in workplaces, schools, and even family dinner table conversations. Teachers played the clip in civics classes as an example of composure under pressure. Law professors dissected it in trial advocacy courses, showing how Crockett maintained her authority without raising her voice. Business schools featured it in leadership seminars, underscoring how real influence comes from calm preparation, not aggressive posturing. On social media, Crockett became a symbol of resilience. TikTok creators remixed her words into motivational edits, and one viral video paired her calm rebuttals with a caption, "Respect isn't loud. Respect is earned." That single clip drew millions of views in under 48 hours. Her confrontation also sparked wider cultural conversations. In workplaces, employees cited her as inspiration to push back against bosses who led by intimidation instead of collaboration. In classrooms, students pointed to her as proof that speaking truth to power didn't require disrespect, only conviction and preparation. And in marginalized communities, her words carried special weight. As a young black woman standing firm in the face of authority, Crockett embodied a kind of strength that resonated deeply with people who had long felt silenced. Even Hollywood took notice. Talk shows lined up to hear her recount the moment, and a streaming network reportedly began developing a docu-series on women in politics, with a courtroom standoff as a centerpiece. But perhaps the clearest sign of her cultural impact came from ordinary people. Across the country, stories circulated online of individuals channeling their inner Crockett. A college student holding firm during a hostile presentation, a young employee respectfully challenging an unfair policy, a parent calmly demanding accountability from a school board. What had begun as a courtroom clash had become a cultural blueprint. A reminder that respect, when wielded with calm strength, could dismantle even the most entrenched power dynamics. And yet, the ripple effects weren't limited to her. For decades, Judge Joe Brown had built his reputation on a courtroom style defined by intimidation, volume, and unchecked authority. Lawyers whispered that he thrived on confrontation, that he equated fear with respect. But the Crockett incident cracked that image wide open. In the days that followed, those closest to him noticed the change first. His clerks, once accustomed to his barked orders, were startled when he began prefacing requests with *please* and following them with *thank you*. Where he once dictated, he began asking, *what do you think? At home, the shift was even more profound. His wife later recalled, Joe came home that night and didn't say a word during dinner. Hours later, he told me, I think I learned something today about the difference between respect and fear. In 40 years of marriage, I had never seen him question himself like that. Professionally, colleagues observed what they quietly called a softening. His voice was still strong in court, but less combative. The explosive outbursts grew rarer, replaced by measured questioning. Legal observers even noted his attendance at judicial temperament seminars, unthinkable for a man once proud of his iron fist reputation. Weeks later, in an interview, Brown admitted, respect is a two-way street. I used to think authority meant control, but authority without respect is nothing but noise. For many, the spectacle of this once feared judge humbled by a young congresswoman carried its own legacy. Crockett had not only walked away stronger, she had reshaped the very man who once tried to tear her down. Though skeptics dismissed his transformation as damage control, those who worked with him daily swore it was genuine. One longtime clerk put it best. It was like watching someone realize that leadership doesn't have to mean domination. It can mean collaboration. In the end, Crockett's defiance didn't just rewrite her own story, it rewrote his. If Judge Brown's transformation was surprising, Jasmine Crockett's ascent was inevitable. The courtroom clash didn't just elevate her profile, it catapulted her into national prominence almost overnight. Within hours of the video going viral, her congressional office was overwhelmed. Phones rang non-stop. Emails poured in. Donations flooded her campaign website from all 50 states, many with short notes attached, for standing tall. For showing my daughter what strength looks like. On Capitol Hill, the ripple effects were immediate. Senior lawmakers who had once dismissed her as just another freshman now sought her counsel. Committee chairs consulted her before major hearings, recognizing her rare ability to stay composed under hostile questioning in a hyperpartisan climate. Political strategists, both Democratic and Republican, studied the footage like a playbook. Her calm dismantling of Brown's authority without ever raising her voice became required viewing in political communication seminars, and analysts noted that she embodied a new model of political leadership. Media outlets framed her as the face of the next generation, bold, unshakable, principled. As one senior colleague put it, Jasmine didn't just win an argument. She showed the country what leadership looks like in the 21st century. Calm, prepared, principled. That's why people are listening to her. The incident solidified her brand as the face of resilience, someone who would not be intimidated by anyone, regardless of their title. Contributions doubled, invitations poured in from universities and leadership summits, and young voters, especially women and people of color, began to see her not just as a congresswoman from Texas but as their voice on the national stage. By the time the next election cycle approached, pundits openly speculated about her future. Would she rise to a key committee chair? A national party leader? Or perhaps something even bigger? As one commentator summed up, Jasmine Crockett didn't just survive a hostile judge. She walked out of that courtroom a national leader. But the clash between Judge Brown and Jasmine Crockett was more than a viral courtroom drama. It evolved into a blueprint for leadership in the modern era, one that transcended politics and law to touch workplaces, classrooms, and everyday lives. The first lesson was simple but profound. Respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. Brown's booming voice and aggressive posture had once commanded fear, but in the end, it was Crockett's calm discipline and dignity that commanded true respect. The second lesson: strength does not require volume. Crockett never raised her voice, yet her words carried more weight than his shouting. Authority, she proved, is not measured in decibels but in discipline. The third lesson was cultural. Representation matters. For many women, particularly women of color, her refusal to be diminished was not just a political statement but a mirror, proof that they too could stand in hostile rooms, maintain their voice, and demand respect without apology. The fourth lesson was generational. The old model of leadership, command and control, intimidation and dominance, was giving way to a new one centered on collaboration, professionalism, and principled conviction. Crockett embodied this transition, and millions recognized it instantly. Finally, the encounter reinforced a universal truth. Authority does not place anyone above accountability. Judges, politicians, bosses, parents. Leadership is not about domination but responsibility, and true power lies in lifting others up, not tearing them down. Years from now, her confrontation with Judge Brown will still be studied in law schools, leadership courses, and political science programs. Not because it was dramatic, but because it distilled a timeless truth. Power rooted in fear crumbles, but power rooted in character endures. As one commentator put it afterward. Judge Brown thought he was dealing with just another witness he could bully. Instead, he met the future of leadership, and she wasn't having it. The legacy of that day was clear. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win an argument. She redefined what strength looks like in the 21st century.